She called him a fake soldier and said he didn't deserve to wear the uniform. What she didn't know, 24 hours later, his face would be on every major news network in America. And she'd realize she'd just humiliated a genuine war hero. This is Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, 28 years old, 3 tours in Afghanistan, Purple Heart recipient, and right now, he's sitting in seat 14B on flight 447 from Dallas to Los Angeles, trying to ignore the woman in 14A who's been making comments about him since takeoff. Her name is Karen Mitchell, 45 years old, self-proclaimed patriot, who posts flag emojis on Facebook but has never served a day in her life, and she's convinced that the young black man in uniform sitting next to her is somehow fake. Excuse me, she says loud enough for half the plane to hear, but that uniform looks awfully new for someone who's supposedly been in combat. Michael doesn't respond. He's learned that engaging with people like Karen usually makes things worse. He's got his headphones in, trying to focus on the book he's reading, a psychology textbook, because he's working on his master's degree through the military education program. But Karen isn't finished. I mean, anyone can buy military clothes online these days. Stolen valor is a real problem, you know. The passengers around them are starting to pay attention. Some look uncomfortable. Others seem curious about where this is heading. A few are already pulling out their phones. Michael closes his book and removes his headphones. Ma'am, I'm not looking for any trouble. Oh, so you can speak English properly, Karen says with mock surprise. How refreshing. The racism isn't even subtle anymore. Other passengers are definitely filming now. Flight attendants are starting to notice the disturbance. But here's what Karen doesn't know. Michael isn't just any soldier. He's not even just any decorated soldier. In 18 hours, his story will be the lead segment on CNN. His photograph will be on the front page of newspapers across the country. His name will be trending on social media worldwide. Because tomorrow morning, the President of the United States will be awarding him the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration possible, for actions that saved 17 American lives in Afghanistan. But right now, he's just a tired soldier trying to get home to see his family before the biggest day of his military career. And Karen Mitchell is about to become the most hated woman in America. What happens next will destroy her life, teach her the hardest lesson she's ever learned, and show everyone watching exactly what happens when ignorance meets heroism at 30,000 feet. Stay with me, because this story is about more than just racism on an airplane. It's about assumptions. It's about what we think we know about people. And it's about how sometimes the universe has a perfect sense of justice. Let me tell you who Michael Rodriguez really is. Born in East Los Angeles to a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Straight, a student who could have gone to any college he wanted, but chose to serve his country instead. Enlisted at 18, right out of high school, because he wanted to make a difference in the world. Basic training at Fort Benning, Advanced Infantry School, Ranger School, Airborne School. Every challenge the Army threw at him, Michael excelled, not because it came easy, because he worked harder than everyone else. His first deployment to Afghanistan was in 2019. He was 23 years old, leading soldiers into combat zones, making life and death decisions that men twice his age struggled with. He came back changed, but determined to keep serving. Second deployment in 2021, that's when he earned his Purple Heart. Shrapnel from an ID explosion left scars on his left arm that he still covers with long sleeves when he's in civilian clothes. Not because he's ashamed of them, but because he doesn't want the attention. Third deployment in 2023, that's when everything changed, October 15, 2023. Forward Operating Base Black Hawk near the Pakistan border. Michael was leading a convoy escort mission when intelligence reports indicated a high, terrorist target was moving through their area. The mission was supposed to be routine: get the convoy safely to the next checkpoint, return to base. But routine missions don't always stay routine. The ambush happened at 1,400 hours. Rocket-propelled grenade, automatic weapon fire, a coordinated attack by approximately 40 Taliban fighters who had been planning this operation for weeks. The convoy was trapped, 17 American soldiers pinned down in a kill zone with no cover and limited ammunition. Radio communications were jammed. Air support was 20 minutes away. 20 minutes they didn't have. That's when Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez made the decision that would define his entire life. He grabbed every grenade he could carry, told his men to lay down suppressing fire, and single-handedly assaulted the enemy position. Not because he was trying to be a hero, because 17 Americans were going to die if someone didn't do something immediately. He fought his way through 3 separate enemy positions, eliminated 12 Taliban fighters, captured the high-value target they'd been seeking, and held that position until air support arrived, despite being wounded twice during the firefight. All 17 soldiers made it home alive. The Medal of Honor recommendation was submitted immediately. The paperwork took 18 months to process through military bureaucracy. The ceremony was scheduled for tomorrow morning at the White House. Michael was flying home to Los Angeles to pick up his mother and his girlfriend Sarah before heading to Washington, D.C. This was supposed to be a quiet flight where he could mentally prepare for the biggest moment of his military career. Instead, he was sitting next to Karen Mitchell. Karen worked in marketing for a mid-sized company in Dallas, divorced twice, 3 kids who barely spoke to her anymore. She spent most of her time on social media arguing with strangers about politics and sharing memes about supporting the troops, while apparently not recognizing an actual soldier when she saw one. She'd boarded the flight already irritated because her first-class upgrade hadn't come through. She was stuck in coach next to what she assumed was just another young black man who was probably lying about military service to get sympathy or special treatment. The uniform looked too clean, too new, too perfect for someone who'd actually been in combat. What she didn't realize was that Michael had just picked up his dress uniform from the dry cleaner that morning. It was clean and pressed because tomorrow he would be standing next to the President of the United States, representing every soldier who'd ever served with honor. The ribbons and badges on his uniform told a story she couldn't read. The Combat Infantryman Badge, the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Army Commendation Medal with V device for Valor, Airborne Wings, Ranger Tab, Expert Infantry Badge. To someone who actually knew military decorations, Michael's uniform was a roadmap of exceptional service and sacrifice. To Karen, it just looked fake. You know, she said as the plane reached cruising altitude, I have a nephew in the Marines, real soldier, been deployed 4 times. His uniform never looks that pristine. Michael tried putting his headphones back in, but Karen wasn't taking the hint. I'm just saying, if you're going to impersonate military personnel, maybe do a little research first. That uniform is way too clean for someone who's supposedly been in combat. Other passengers were starting to eavesdrop. A middle-aged businessman in the row ahead turned around to see what the commotion was about. A college student across the aisle had her phone out, clearly recording. Michael took a deep breath. 24 hours from now, he would be shaking hands with the president. His mother would be crying in the audience. Sarah would be wearing the dress she'd bought specifically for the ceremony. All he had to do was get through this flight without incident. Unfortunately, Karen was just getting started. I mean, look at you, Karen continued, her voice growing louder and more aggressive. You can't be more than 25 years old. When exactly did you have time for all this supposed military service? Michael finally looked directly at her. Ma'am, I'm 28. I've been in the army for 10 years. 10 years, Karen laughed. a harsh, mocking sound that carried throughout the cabin. "So you enlisted when you were 18, and now you're some kind of decorated war hero, please." The businessman in the row ahead fully turned around now. Other passengers were openly staring. Flight attendants were starting to take notice of the disturbance. "I don't need to prove anything to you," Michael said quietly. "Oh, but I think you do." Karen was enjoying the attention now, playing to her audience. "You see, I actually support our troops, real troops, not fake ones looking for handouts and special treatment." She pointed at his uniform with obvious disdain. "Anyone can buy military surplus online. Anyone can sew on some patches and pretend to be a hero. But those of us who actually respect the military can spot the fakes." A woman in the row behind them spoke up. "Ma'am, maybe you should mind your own business." Karen whirled around. "Excuse me, I'm protecting the honor of real soldiers who actually served our country, unlike this person who thinks he can fool people with his costume. It's not a costume," Michael said, his patience finally starting to wear thin. "Prove it." "I don't have to prove anything to you. See," Karen announced to the cabin like she'd scored a victory. "He can't prove it because it's not real. I bet he doesn't even have military ID. That crossed a line." Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his military identification card, his orders showing his current assignment, and his airline ticket that clearly showed his active duty military discount. Karen barely glanced at them. "Those could be fake too. You can buy anything online these days." The flight attendant, Jessica, finally approached their row. "Is everything all right here? This man," Karen said loudly, "is impersonating a soldier. I think he should be arrested when we land." Jessica looked at Michael's uniform, clearly recognizing genuine military dress blues. "Sir, are you active duty military?" "Yes, ma'am." Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, 75th Ranger Regiment. "Rangers," the businessman ahead of them said, suddenly interested. "My father was a ranger in Vietnam." Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh, now he's Special Forces too. What's next, Navy SEALs?" "Ma'am," Jessica said diplomatically, "perhaps we could move you to another seat." "I'm not moving." He should move, or better yet, he should admit he's lying about military service so we can all stop pretending. Michael closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In 24 hours, he would be receiving the nation's highest military honor. Today, he was being called a liar by a stranger who thought she knew more about military service than someone who'd actually served. "You know what I think?" Karen continued, warming up to her audience. "I think this is exactly what's wrong with our country. People lying about military service to get sympathy, to get special treatment, to get free drinks and thank you for your service comments." She was playing to the crowd now, looking around the cabin for support. A few passengers seemed uncomfortable with her behavior, but others appeared to be enjoying the drama. "I have a nephew who's a real Marine," she announced. "Deployed to Iraq twice, and let me tell you, he doesn't walk around in his uniform looking for attention. He doesn't expect special treatment. He serves with honor." Michael opened his eyes and looked at her directly. "What's your nephew's name?" The question caught Karen off guard. "What? Your nephew, the Marine? What's his name? What unit? When did he deploy?" Karen stammered. That's personal information." "But you're using his service to justify attacking mine." "I'm not attacking anything. I'm exposing stolen valor." The college student who'd been recording spoke up from across the aisle. "Ma'am, maybe you're wrong about this." "I am not wrong," Karen snapped. "Look at him. Does he look like someone who's been in combat? Does that uniform look like it's seen any real action?" Michael's jaw tightened. The uniform was clean, because it had been professionally pressed for tomorrow's ceremony. The decorations were real because he'd earned every single one of them. The pride he felt wearing it was genuine because he'd bled for the right to wear it. But explaining that to Karen would mean explaining about tomorrow. About the Medal of Honor, about the ceremony he'd spent months preparing for, and frankly, he didn't owe her any explanations. "You want to know what combat looks like?" Michael said quietly, rolling up his left sleeve to reveal the shrapnel scars from his Purple Heart injury. Karen barely glanced at them. Scars don't prove anything. Could be from a car accident. That's when the businessman ahead of them had enough. Lady, you need to shut up. Excuse me. You heard me. This soldier has shown you his ID, his orders, his injuries, and you're still calling him a liar. What exactly would convince you? Nothing, Karen said defiantly, because real soldiers don't need to prove themselves to civilians. They serve quietly without looking for attention. The irony was staggering. She was demanding proof while simultaneously claiming that asking for proof was inappropriate. She was attacking him for seeking attention, while making a scene that had drawn the attention of the entire airplane. "Ma'am," the flight attendant tried again. "I really think it would be better if I'm not done," Karen interrupted. "You know what else bothers me about fake soldiers? They take credit away from real heroes, from people who actually sacrificed for this country." Michael's hands clenched into fists. He'd watched friends die in Afghanistan. He'd carried wounded soldiers to safety under enemy fire. He'd made split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death for his men. And this woman was calling him fake. "Real heroes," Karen continued, "don't walk around in uniform on civilian flights. They don't expect special treatment. They don't, ma'am." Michael's voice cut through her rant like a knife. "I need you to stop talking now, or what? You'll call your fake military friends." The cabin was dead silent now. Even the flight attendants had stopped pretending to be busy. Every passenger within earshot was watching this confrontation unfold. Michael stood up slowly, at 6'2" and 190 pounds of military muscle. He was an imposing figure, but his voice remained calm and controlled. "I've served 3 tours in Afghanistan. I've been wounded in combat defending this country. I've earned every ribbon and badge on this uniform through blood, sweat, and sacrifice that you couldn't begin to understand." He paused, looking directly at Karen. "But more importantly, tomorrow morning I'll be at the White House receiving the Medal of Honor from the President of the United States for actions that saved 17 American lives." The entire cabin erupted. Passengers started talking at once. Phones came out to record. The flight attendants looked stunned. Karen's face went white. You're lying." Michael reached into his carry-on bag and pulled out a folder containing his orders for the Medal of Honor ceremony. Official White House letterhead, presidential seal, his name clearly visible. He handed it to the flight attendant, who read it with growing amazement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jessica announced over the plane's intercom, "we have a very special passenger on board today. Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez will be receiving the Medal of Honor tomorrow morning for extraordinary heroism in combat." Spontaneous applause broke out throughout the cabin. Passengers were standing up to shake Michael's hand. The businessman's eyes were filled with tears. Karen sat in her seat, staring at the official documents, her face cycling through disbelief, horror, and dawning realization of what she'd done. She'd just spent an hour calling America's newest Medal of Honor recipient a fake soldier, on camera, in front of dozens of witnesses. I didn't know," she whispered. Michael took his documents back and sat down. "No, ma'am, you didn't know, but that didn't stop you from making assumptions." The college student across the aisle was already posting her video to social media with the caption, "Woman calls Medal of Honor recipient fake soldier on airplane." Within 6 hours, it would have 10 million views. Within 12 hours, Karen Mitchell's life would be completely destroyed, and she still had no idea what was coming. The rest of the flight was a completely different experience for Michael Rodriguez. Passengers kept stopping by his seat to shake his hand and thank him for his service. The flight attendants upgraded him to first class and made sure he had anything he needed. The captain even came out of the cockpit to meet him and thank him personally. Karen Mitchell, meanwhile, sat in stunned silence, staring at her phone. She'd Googled Michael Rodriguez Medal of Honor, and found dozens of news articles about tomorrow's ceremony, photos of Michael in combat gear, detailed accounts of his heroic actions in Afghanistan, interviews with the soldiers whose lives he'd saved. Every single thing he'd told her was true, more than true. He'd actually been modest about his accomplishments. The articles described actions that seemed impossible for one person to achieve: single-handedly assaulting enemy positions, fighting through multiple wounds to save his men, displaying the kind of courage that military historians would study for decades. And she'd called him fake on camera, in front of dozens of witnesses, with video that was probably already circulating on social media. Karen tried to find the college student who'd been recording, hoping she could convince her to delete the video. But when she looked across the aisle, the girl was gone, moved to a different section of the plane to get away from the woman who'd humiliated a war hero. "Excuse me," Karen said to the flight attendant, "I need to speak with that young woman who was recording earlier." "Ma'am, I think it's best if you just stay in your seat for the remainder of the flight." The tone was polite but firm. Karen was being managed now, treated like the problem passenger she'd become. Meanwhile, Michael was experiencing something he'd rarely encountered in his military career: universal respect and admiration from civilians. An elderly veteran from the Korean War made his way back from first class just to salute him. A young mother brought her son over to meet a real American hero. Even the businessman who defended him earlier introduced himself and insisted on buying Michael dinner when they landed. "Son," the veteran said with tears in his eyes, "I've been waiting 60 years to meet a Medal of Honor recipient. It's the greatest honor of my life." Michael was humbled by the attention, but also uncomfortable with it. He'd learned long ago that the real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. He was just doing his job, making the best decisions he could in impossible situations. But he also understood the symbolic importance of what he represented. To these civilians, he wasn't just Michael Rodriguez from East LA. He was proof that the American military was still producing people of exceptional character and courage. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Karen made one final desperate attempt at damage control. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said quietly, leaning across the aisle. Michael looked at her but didn't respond. I owe you an apology. I made a mistake." "Yes, ma'am, you did. I was wrong about you, about your service, about everything." Michael studied her face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by genuine fear and regret. She was starting to understand the magnitude of what she'd done. "Ma'am, the problem isn't that you were wrong about me specifically. The problem is that you made assumptions about someone based on their race and age, then refused to listen when presented with evidence that contradicted those assumptions." Karen flinched as if she'd been slapped. "I'm not racist. I support the troops. Supporting the troops means supporting all troops, not just the ones who look like what you think soldiers should look like. I know that now. Is there anything I can do to make this right?" Michael considered her question. What could she possibly do to make up for an hour of public humiliation based on racial prejudice? What could she do to repair the damage that was probably already spreading across social media? "Ma'am, the best thing you can do is learn from this experience. Question your assumptions about people. Listen when someone tells you who they are. And maybe think twice before you decide someone is lying about military service." The plane touched down at LAX to scattered applause, not for the landing, but for the Medal of Honor recipient in Seat 2A. As passengers began deplaning, many stopped to shake Michael's hand one final time. The captain made an announcement over the intercom, thanking him for his service and wishing him well at tomorrow's ceremony. Karen Mitchell slipped off the plane as quickly as possible, hoping to disappear into the crowd and pretend this whole incident had never happened. But the internet doesn't forget. While she was still walking through the terminal, the college student's video was going viral on TikTok. Medal of Honor, stolen valor, racism, Karen on a plane were all trending topics. The video had been screened, recorded, and reposted hundreds of times. Comments were flooding in from across the country, expressing outrage at Karen's behavior and admiration for Michael's restraint. News outlets were picking up the story. Military blogs were sharing it. Veterans organizations were commenting on it. By the time Karen got home to Dallas, her phone was exploding with notifications. Text messages from friends asking if she was the woman in the video. Facebook posts tagging her. LinkedIn connections distancing themselves from her. Her employer had seen the video too, Karen. Her boss said when she called in the next morning, "We need to talk." The marketing company she worked for prided itself on diversity and inclusion. Their client base included several defense contractors who worked closely with the military. Having an employee who publicly humiliated a Medal of Honor recipient was not compatible with their brand values. "I can explain," Karen began. "There's no explanation that makes this acceptable. We're letting you go." Meanwhile, Michael was waking up in his childhood bedroom in East LA, preparing for the most important day of his military career. His mother, Maria, was already up making his favorite breakfast. His girlfriend Sarah had flown in from Colorado, where she was finishing her nursing degree. His old high school teachers had seen the airplane video and were posting proud messages about their former student. The local news wanted to interview him. The national news wanted to interview him. But Michael was focused on one thing: representing his fellow soldiers with dignity at the White House ceremony. He put on his dress uniform one more time, the same uniform Karen had called fake 12 hours earlier. The same ribbons and badges she'd claimed were purchased online. The same pride she'd said was unearned. As he adjusted his tie, Michael thought about the soldiers who wouldn't be at today's ceremony, the friends he'd lost in Afghanistan, the men whose lives he'd saved in that firefight 18 months ago. He was accepting this medal not just for himself, but for all of them. At exactly the same time, Karen Mitchell was sitting in her apartment, watching the Medal of Honor ceremony live on television, realizing that her life would never be the same. The ceremony at the White House was everything Michael had dreamed it would be. President Biden placed the Medal of Honor around his neck, while his mother wept in the audience and Sarah beamed with pride. The citation was read aloud, detailing his heroic actions that saved 17 American lives. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the president said, exemplifies the very best of American military service. His actions that day in Afghanistan represent the highest traditions of courage, sacrifice, and commitment to his fellow soldiers. Meanwhile, Karen Mitchell was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. The hashtag #KarenVS Medal of Honor was being used millions of times. Her LinkedIn profile had been found and shared. Her Facebook posts about supporting the troops were being screenshot and mocked. Her former employer had issued a statement distancing themselves from her behavior. She'd become a national symbol of ignorance and prejudice. Death threats filled her inbox. Reporters were calling for interviews. Her address had been posted online by anonymous accounts demanding she apologize publicly. 3 days later, she finally did. "I want to publicly apologize to Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez and his family for my inexcusable behavior on Flight 447, she said in a video posted to all her social media accounts. "I made assumptions based on prejudice and ignorance. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry." The apology went viral too, but not in a good way. Comments poured in calling it too little, too late, and questioning whether she was truly sorry or just sorry she got caught. Michael saw the apology but didn't respond publicly. He was too busy with interviews about his military service, speaking engagements at schools, and preparing to transition into civilian life with his new role as a military advocate. But privately, He hoped Karen had learned something from the experience. That maybe, just maybe, she would think twice before making assumptions about someone based on their appearance. The real lesson wasn't about Karen Mitchell, though. It was about how quickly our assumptions can be shattered when we're confronted with truth. Michael Rodriguez didn't need to prove himself to anyone on that airplane. His uniform, his service, his character, they spoke for themselves to anyone willing to listen. But Karen chose not to listen. She chose to see what she expected to see rather than what was actually in front of her. Have you ever made assumptions about someone that turned out to be completely wrong? What did that teach you? Share your story in the comments below. And remember, the next time you see someone in uniform, maybe just say thank you instead of questioning whether they've earned the right to wear it.